Fans of this channel know that I am very critical of the U.S. military's head in the sand, never change attitude, even in the face of a rapidly evolving battlefield. But credit where credit's due, at least one commander seems to be changing and rewriting the rules of the battlefield. We're going to talk today about the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team. Let's get into it. All right, so this is a story that I was fully prepared to hate, because if there's one thing the U.S. military seems to love doing, it's launching initiatives with no teeth and then glad-handing themselves, claiming that they are innovating because a couple of officers at the Pentagon are running a work table. But I was pleasantly surprised. The 1st Armored Division's Brigade Combat Team rotated through NTC recently, and it sounds like their commander is finally forcing the Army to confront its static and hidebound attitudes. Now, this is a really interesting story, and most interesting about it is that the Army is acknowledging that it happened instead of punishing the commander. So, for those of you that don't know, NTC, or the National Training Center, is the capstone for U.S. Army combat brigades. What happens is those brigades will spend about 9 months training up, right? Working on individual skills, then squads, platoons, companies, and finally battalions, learning how to maneuver and operate together in a combat environment. And then finally, when those brigades are at their most ready, they deploy to a combat zone, the National Training Center in Fort Irwin, right? And the idea is that for about a week, those units are in combat, right? They call it going into the box, right? And when the door shuts on the box, those units are treated like they are in a real combat scenario. But they are against, of course, a highly trained U.S. Army combat unit with the home field advantage, right? Now, they use a complex system of lasers and some computer models to understand forecasts and attrition, and it's meant to be a neck-and-neck fight between these combat teams and the units in the home turf. So it's meant to not necessarily be unwinnable, but it's also not meant to give you an easy win so you can pat yourself on the back. It's meant to challenge every system in this system, in these commanders. Now, here's what's interesting, is that in July, the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team got to go to NTC, but somebody actually opened up their browser and learned a thing or two about what's happening in Ukraine. And one of the things that their opponents, the highly trained Black Horse unit, this is the home team, so to speak, has been doing is relying heavily on electronic warfare. So the brigade's commander realized that, like the Russian forces in Ukraine, Black Horse was going to be monitoring the electronic spectrum, using things like cell phones and satellite dishes to pinpoint where they thought the 1st Armored and their critical command posts were headquartered. And so, leading up to the training exercise, their battalion talks and brigade talks actually would get feedback on how easily detectable their electronic signatures were. And they were also given commercially available direction finding equipment to further pinpoint the talks locations. This is right here something that I think is really, really something the military needs to scale into, which is their willingness to use some level of commercially available systems to do things that would otherwise not be possible, right? Or would be unfeasibly difficult using existing military equipment. Because again, do you think Hamas, we know the Russians, the Ukrainians, everybody is using commercially available tech in this conflict. And it's because there's no better alternative, right? And so, 1st Armored, when they went out to NTC, they said, listen, the desert is a big open space. If there is any electronic cell phone signals, they're going to know that it's the 1st Armored, and they're going to bring fire to bear right onto that talk. And so what did they do? They made a fake talk. They actually brought in fake devices. They bought cell phones and let them connect. They bought Wi-Fi pucks. They actually put out their actual radar dish and allow them to have secure internet. And here's the crazy part is it was a fake talk. It was a decoy command post. It looked totally real, right? The unit was able to literally use all of their own gear in the fake talk because, and this is the part that I love, the actual talk was operating off of a Starlink terminal that the commanders had purchased. The Starlink actually had better speeds. And here's the thing with the Starlink, guys. You go, oh, well, it's not secure. It's this, that, and the other thing is wrong with it. Guys, there's nothing wrong with it. You know why? Because against a peer adversary, against Russia, Starlinks are working great. So the soldiers would actually send fake transmissions, right? Fake cell phone signals from this fake command post, and it worked. Even the home team, the Black Horse unit, jammed the fake command post, not the real one, and hit the fake command post with indirect fire, exposing their own position. Now, eventually, Black Horse did figure it out because they went on the ground and said, hey, there's no soldiers at this fake command post. Nobody's panicking that they've been hit with IDF. But how do you create a fake-looking command post without real soldiers? But of course, here's the thing in war. You just need to get one win, right? As we saw in Ukraine with Ocheratina, right? Where a failure of two brigades to conduct a proper battle handoff was all the opening Russia needed to launch their Donetsk offensive. And it hasn't slowed down since then. Now, before we talk about the other aspect that I think showed real creativity in this exercise, I wanted to mention that if you feel like you are in day 3 of the box and you need to stay one step ahead, you may not need to rely on your overpriced Starlink system or some other Elon Musk nonsense. Instead, you may need some Strike Gum. Strike Gum is made in the USA. It's veteran owned. It has all the caffeine of an energy drink. I know if you've been in a talk doing that, planning, running operations for 24 or 48 hours straight. I know you guys. I see you. You need caffeine. But here's the thing. Look, this has the equivalent of 5 Red Bulls worth of caffeine, 5 pieces. To get that, that's going to take like a 30-year ruck, okay? Or your gym bag, or whatever you take on your construction site. This is going to keep you going for days. 5 energy drinks is what's in here. You pop a piece, you chew it, you go. If you are, and it's not just for military, right? Yeah, I made it based on my own military experiences in Afghanistan when I had to haul around a bunch of energy drinks in my MRAP just to stay caffeinated. But it's for nurses, construction workers, firefighters, cops, anybody that can't show up to work sipping an energy drink. That's who I made this for. So listen, go to strikegum.com. The link is in the description. Join the over 50% of people. Thousands have ordered, and we see 50% of them have reordered Strike Gum. They chewed one piece, and they're like, I want this. And oh yeah, we're also the highest rated energy gum on Amazon. No big deal. So thanks to all you guys that have left us those 5-star reviews, because that makes a huge difference, and it tells us and it tells other folks on Amazon that there's one premium energy drink or energy drink alternative, and it's Strike Gum. Okay, so let's talk about the other aspect here, right? The unit brought a bunch of drones on the exercise, 90 drones. For the record, guys, I'm pretty sure that's like what a Ukrainian battalion will field, but it's fine, right? A lot of these were reconnaissance drones, but what there weren't was attack drones. That's one of the things the brigade really wants. And they said, listen, we really want to have attack drones. But here's what was awesome. Normally, when you fly something in the air, you have to deconflict airspace. And holy smokes, guys, if you haven't done airspace deconfliction, it's a fucking nightmare. Okay, I remember in Afghanistan, we waited on site for an hour plus while the brigade tried to deconflict a simple 15-minute drone flight. It put our unit at tremendous risk. We assumed greater risk by waiting for the battalion to do its thing than we ever did actually flying the drone. And so this unit said, listen, we're going to assume risk by not flying drones, and we're going to assume risk by having a lengthy, complex deconfliction process. So you know what they said? They said, new rule. If this drone's under 150 feet in elevation, it is now considered a munition. And it's a good point. They said, listen, if you fire a grenade or an artillery shell, you don't call Brigade Aviation and say, do we have permission to send a round through the air? Right? And they said, listen, treat it like the same. Don't ask for permission. Just fire the fucking thing. Make sure there's no aircraft in the area and shoot your shot. Because that's what they said. A FPV drone is a mortar round with a camera that can fly. That's it. And the reality is that you have to think about this sort of thing, right? And this kind of and there's still issues, right? They talk about the fact that it got so hot in the brigade's vehicles because they didn't have air conditioning that the actual software, the actual processors began to slow. But this is the sort of thinking that the military needs to do, right? One of the things that I think was a massive failure from Iraq and Afghanistan is that commanders lived in a risk-reducing environment. They said, we have to reduce the risk as much as possible. And that attitude, again, created more risk. Because you had, again, the classic example is the deconfliction. They said, listen, we don't want there to be a risk of a collision in the air. Doesn't happen that often, but it's pretty expensive when it does. So they said everything that flies has to be deconflicted. But when that results in a unit sitting still in place for hours, waiting for deconfliction to happen, what has happened? You've risked soldiers' lives to offset the risk of an extremely unlikely event. And so this is a function, I think, of the U.S. Army's attitude towards risk, and it warms my heart to see that there are some commanders that understand that there is risks to doing things the old way, and that'll, especially in this evolving battlefield, there is greater risk in not innovating. And again, I point this out because look at your own life. In the last 10 years, do you even remember what 2014 was like? Right? We had smartphones, but we didn't have a third of the apps that we have now, right? We were just starting to see things like Uber, DoorDash. Look at how much our lives have changed, right? Work from home was an occasional ancillary benefit. The world has evolved so much in 10 years. And finally, some people in the Pentagon, not all of them, probably not enough of them, are starting to realize that same massive shift that happened in our day-to-day lives has also happened on the battlefield. The U.S. Army can either learn or die. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. That makes a difference. And thanks to all the Colonel tier members of the CombatVetNews.com, Martin Baum, Chris Rossi, Stuart Abel, Daniel Brown, Sergei Zinchenko, Chris Holmes, Chris Gorsuch, Daniel M., Ida Skycall, as well as all of our Lieutenant tier members. I couldn't do this without your support. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.